Emma stared at him, horrified. "I'm just cleaning," she whispered. He blinked, confused for a moment, then skeptical. "You're a cleaner." Emma couldn't answer. Her eyes filled with tears. She grabbed her cloth, stood up, and backed away. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "I'll leave." She left the cart, her aunt's ID, everything, and ran. The moment Emma turned to face him, the stillness of the presidential suite shattered. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the cloth. Her breathing was uneven, eyes wide with confusion and fear. The man standing by the door studied her for a long beat. He sat down, placing his phone on the side table with slow deliberation, his gaze fixed on her, like he was trying to place her in a context that made sense. He took a few steps forward, his voice low and tinged with sardonic amusement. "You know," he said, "I thought I told them I wasn't interested in this kind of service anymore." Emma blinked. I'm sorry. "The hotel," he clarified, as though she were in on a private joke. "They like to be discreet with their VIP guests. A little after-hours surprise. It's not the first time they've done this, but I told them to stop." He motioned vaguely toward her, as if that explained everything. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She was too stunned to speak. He misread her silence as part of the act. "No need to be nervous," he continued with a slight smile. "Really, you can relax. I had a long day and I just want some quiet tonight. You don't need to go through the whole routine." The words felt like ice in her ears. "What?" she finally whispered. "You're not the first girl they've sent. But this time they went for something a little more subtle, less flashy, more innocent-looking. I must admit, they have a good eye for performance." Emma's face drained of color. "Performance?" she echoed. He nodded, then chuckled softly. "You're very convincing. The whole lost-in-the-room look. The humble clothes. The wide-eyed innocence. It's a bit overdone, but charming." She stepped back as if he had struck her. Her lips parted in disbelief. "I'm not," she tried to say, but her throat tightened. Her voice rose in desperation. "I'm not a performer. I'm not something you get with a sweet upgrade." The last word cracked out of her like a slap. The amusement vanished from his face, replaced by a flicker of doubt. "Wait," he said. "You're serious?" Emma's eyes glistened. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. "How dare you? Just because I'm in this room wearing a cheap uniform doesn't mean I'm for sale." He stepped forward, alarmed now. "I didn't mean." But she was already moving. Her breath hitched. She turned away, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. On her way out, her elbow struck the cleaning cart, knocking it askew. Her aunt's ID badge slipped off her chest and fell to the carpet, face down. He called after her again. "Wait. I made a mistake." "I didn't." Emma yanked the door open and rushed into the hallway, the opulent silence closing behind her like a wall. Inside, Alexander stood frozen. He stared at the door, then slowly turned his head to the cart she had left behind. He walked over, picked up the ID from the floor and read the name. Lily Mendes. Not Emma. He glanced back at the door, his brows furrowing. He was many things. Ruthless in business, cold with strangers, but not cruel by nature. And what he had just done. It replayed in his mind with growing unease. The way she looked at him, not offended like someone overacting in a role, but genuinely hurt. He ran a hand through his hair, letting out a breath. Back in the hallway, Emma took the staff stairs 2 steps at a time, hot tears spilling down her cheeks. She had never been so humiliated in her life. All she wanted was to help her aunt finish her task quietly and go home. But instead she had been mistaken for something vile, something less than human. And the way he had looked at her, like she was just another amenity in his luxury suite, burned deep in her chest. She made it back to the staff lounge, stripped the uniform off with shaking fingers, and changed into her own clothes. Her aunt's ID was gone, but she couldn't go back for it. Not now. She left the hotel through the same back entrance. The cold night air hit her like a slap. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but her face was already wet. She walked the long way home, her thoughts spiraling. One night. One simple favor. That was all it was supposed to be. She had no idea how one misunderstanding in a luxury suite would change the course of her entire life. Back in the presidential suite, Alexander Hart stood alone long after the girl had vanished. The silence pressed down on him harder than before. The fire in the marble hearth had long gone out, yet he remained near it, staring at the ID badge in his hand. Lily Mendes, it read. He turned it over again, as if the name might somehow change. But the photo on the badge was unmistakably not the girl who had just fled the room. Something twisted in his gut. He had seen hundreds of women try to use charm or manipulation, for access, for favors, for money. He had trained himself to spot deception from miles away. But tonight something didn't add up. She hadn't flirted. She hadn't played coy. She looked terrified. Humiliated. Not like someone caught in a lie, but like someone accused of something vile. Alexander ran a hand over his jaw, a flicker of guilt tightening across his chest. He walked over to the phone on the desk and dialed the security office. "This is Hart," he said firmly. "I want access to the hallway and suite camera footage from the past 2 hours. Floor 16. Now." "Yes, Mr. Hart," came the immediate response. 10 minutes later, he sat before a monitor in the private office downstairs, reviewing the footage. He watched as the girl, still unnamed, pushed the cart into the hallway. She struggled to maneuver it, clearly unfamiliar with the layout. She entered the suite without hesitation, working quickly and methodically. Her movements were clean, efficient, no trace of seduction, nothing out of place. There was no one else with her. No handoff, no signs of a planned encounter. She was simply doing her job. Or rather, someone else's. "Who is she?" Alexander asked quietly. The head of security shifted uncomfortably. "Well, the badge she used belongs to Lily Mendes, longtime cleaning staff. But that wasn't Lily. We can run facial recognition through employee records if you'd like." "No," Alexander interrupted. "Just give me everything you have on Mendes. Address, schedule, family information." Of course. Back in his suite, Alexander sat with the file open on his tablet. Lily Mendes, 57 years old. Employed at Grand Avalon for 7 years. 0 disciplinary marks. Lived in a working-class neighborhood east of the city. 1 dependent listed under emergency contact. Mendes. The name jolted him. He stared at it for a long moment. That must have been her. He didn't know what disturbed him more. The fact that he had insulted a young woman who was clearly trying to help her injured aunt, or the fact that he had looked at her with the same cold detachment he reserved for transactional encounters. Her face returned to his mind in perfect clarity. Wide brown eyes filled with tears. The way her voice broke. The rawness of her pain. He was a man known for never second-guessing himself. Tonight he could not stop. He was a man known for never second-guessing himself. Tonight he could not stop. He stood abruptly and walked to the window. The rain had stopped, but the city below still shimmered with leftover stormlight. 4 years he had lived his life with precision. Deals, data, control. Feelings were inconvenient. People were assets or liabilities. But that girl, Emma, was neither. She was real. And he had reduced her to something less than human in a single careless assumption. Alexander turned away from the window, jaw tight. He reached for his phone and dialed his executive assistant. "Claire," he said when she answered, groggy. "First thing tomorrow morning, I want you to schedule a private meeting with the hotel manager. I also need background on all cleaning staff assigned to executive floors in the past 72 hours. And find me a phone number or address for Emma Mendes." Claire paused. "Of course, sir. May I ask why?" Alexander exhaled slowly, staring at the ID badge still resting on his nightstand. "Because I made a mistake," he said. And I intend to fix it. 2 days later, Alexander Hart stood in front of a faded green door in a narrow hallway of a low-income housing complex on the east side of the city. The building smelled faintly of mildew and boiled vegetables, a stark contrast to the marble and eucalyptus-scented air of the Grand Avalon. He adjusted the collar of his coat and knocked twice. The door creaked open, and a woman in her late 50s peeked out, her eyes wary, until she recognized him from photographs and news articles. "Mr. Hart?" she asked, surprised. "Yes," he said with a polite nod. "You must be Ms. Mendes." She blinked, then opened the door wider with some effort, leaning on a cane. "Forgive me," she said. "My ankle's still healing. Come in if you don't mind the mess." The apartment was small but clean. A worn couch sat in the middle of a modest living room, next to a stack of medical books and empty tea mugs. The television was off, and the air was filled with the scent of lavender and menthol ointment. Alexander stepped in, taking in the modest surroundings. He had been in boardrooms more opulent than most ballrooms, but this space, humble and personal, made him oddly quiet. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said gently. Lily offered a tired smile as she settled onto the couch. "I guessed that. You're not exactly the suing type. But I know why you're here." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "You figured out it wasn't you cleaning that night?" Lily nodded. "I heard from one of the staff that you were asking questions about Emma." He nodded slowly. "Yes, I realized I made a mistake. A serious one." Lily looked down, twisting the hem of her sweater. "She was only trying to help me. I had fallen, twisted my ankle bad, and if I missed that shift I was afraid I'd lose my job. So she offered to go. Just for one night." Alexander remained silent. "She begged me not to tell anyone," Lily continued, her voice growing softer. "Said if someone found out she wasn't staff, I'd be fired. She thought she could just go in, clean a few rooms, and leave without anyone noticing." "But someone did," Alexander murmured. Lily nodded. "She hasn't stopped crying since." He looked at the books on the table again. "Medical school. She's in her final year. Applying for a scholarship. Works 2 part-time jobs and still studies till midnight. I keep telling her she's burning the candle at both ends, but she says it's the only way." Alexander let out a slow breath. "She didn't deserve what I said to her." "No," Lily agreed. "But she understands why you thought what you did. She knows how people like her are seen. Especially by people like you." There was no accusation in her voice, just tired truth. Alexander stood. "Can I speak with her?" Lily looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "She's at campus most of the day. Med building. Room 213. She volunteers in the free clinic after class. She's hard to miss." Alexander stood just outside the glass window, his hand hovering near the door handle. For a man who had closed billion-dollar deals without flinching, this moment somehow made his palms sweat. He watched her for a moment. Emma was completely focused, carefully sorting medications, her brow furrowed in concentration. She looked tired but determined. The same girl who had once stood trembling in his suite now moved with quiet purpose, surrounded by people who clearly respected her. Finally he stepped inside. The door creaked softly, drawing her attention. Her eyes met his, and in that instant everything around them seemed to pause. She froze, the bottle of pills in her hand nearly slipping from her fingers. "You," she breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "I came to apologize," Alexander said, his tone gentle. "May I talk to you? Just for a moment." Emma looked around uncertain. A nurse gave her a questioning glance. She nodded toward the hallway and motioned for Alexander to follow. They stepped outside into a quieter corridor. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly. Emma folded her arms, trying to steady her breath. "You don't need to say anything," she said quickly. "I shouldn't have been there. I know it was wrong. I didn't want my aunt to lose her job." "I know," Alexander replied. I saw the footage. I know now that you weren't trying to deceive anyone. You were helping someone you love. Emma blinked, tears threatening to rise again. Then why did you say what you did? You made me feel like I was nothing. Like I was disgusting. Alexander looked down, guilt etching deep into his features. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I misjudged you. I let my assumptions guide me instead of the truth. And it's haunted me since that night. She was silent. You were brave, he continued. Compassionate. And you showed a kind of integrity most people in my world don't even understand. Emma looked at him for a long moment, then shook her head. I don't need your pity. It's not pity, he said firmly. It's respect. And regret. She turned slightly, brushing away a tear. You're the first person to ever say that to me. Alexander took a slow step closer. Let me make it right. I don't know how yet, but I want to try. Emma looked up at him again, her eyes wide and searching. Why? She asked. Why do you care? He gave a faint, sad smile. Because for the first time in a long while, someone made me care. You reminded me what it means to be human. Emma's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't the cold, intimidating billionaire from the Grand Avalon. This was a man who looked real, flawed, human. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. You don't even know me, she whispered. I'd like to, Alexander replied. If you'll let me. Emma blinked back more tears. I'm not the kind of girl men like you notice, Mr. Hart. I study all night, work all day, take care of my aunt, and scrape together pennies for lunch. You live in penthouses and fly in private jets. We don't live in the same universe. He smiled faintly. Then maybe I've been living in the wrong one. She looked away, overwhelmed. I don't need saving, she murmured. I'm not here to save you, he said softly. Maybe I'm the one who needs saving. That made her turn back toward him. I can't promise I'll forgive you, she said. You made me feel so small that night. I know, he said. And I'll carry that until you do. Emma was quiet. The hallway seemed to stretch forever, humming with a quiet shuffle of footsteps and distant beeping from inside the clinic. I volunteer here every Wednesday and Friday, she said at last. If you want to understand me, start there. Alexander nodded. I'll be here. She gave him one last look, then turned and walked back inside. The door closed behind her gently. Alexander stood in the hallway for a moment longer, letting the weight of it all settle in. For once, there was no deal to negotiate, no numbers to crunch, no plan to execute. Just the beginning of something uncertain. And maybe, something real. 3 days later, Alexander sat in the tiny break room of the free clinic, wearing a plain navy button-up and jeans. No designer labels. No entourage. Just a clipboard, a nervous heart, and a deeply unfamiliar sense of vulnerability. Mr. Hart, came a teasing voice from the doorway. You showed up. Emma stood there in her volunteer scrubs, a glimmer of surprise and curiosity in her eyes. I said I would, he replied, standing up. And, you can call me Alexander. She nodded slowly. All right, Alexander. Follow me. You're going to help me stock the supply closet. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't what anyone expected the billionaire CEO of Hart Global to be doing. But Alexander found something grounding in the simple repetition. Bandages in one bin, gloves in another, painkillers on the top shelf. Emma worked beside him in silence for a while, then asked, Why are you really here? He hesitated, then said honestly, Because when I looked at you that night, I saw something I didn't recognize. Kindness without an angle. Strength without pride. I've built my life around people who want things from me. You didn't. She didn't respond right away. Just kept organizing. I judged you, he went on. I assumed the worst. I thought you were someone trying to manipulate me for money or attention. But now I know. You were just trying to help someone you love. Emma exhaled, soft and slow. That's the thing about people like me. We're used to being invisible until someone assumes we've done something wrong. That hit him hard. I want to see you clearly now, he said. Not as a mistake or a misunderstanding. As Emma. She glanced at him, eyes filled with a strange mix of caution and hope. Well, she said softly, if you're serious about being here, there's a lot more closets to organize. And charts to sort. And flu shots to give. He gave a small smile. Then I guess I'd better roll up my sleeves. And for the first time in years, Alexander Hart spent an afternoon not thinking about money, power, or control. He was just a man, standing next to a woman whose heart had more value than anything he'd ever owned. Over the next few weeks, Alexander returned to the clinic every afternoon he could spare. He didn't announce who he was. He didn't bring a security detail. Most of the staff and volunteers simply assumed he was a quiet new donor doing community service. Emma kept her distance at first, polite but guarded. She spoke to him like any other colleague, with firm instructions, the occasional dry joke, and barely a glimpse into her personal life. But Alexander watched. He saw the way she knelt in front of children to calm their fears, how she comforted elderly patients with trembling hands and tired eyes, how she stayed hours past her shift to make sure the charts were done right or someone had a ride home. He had known powerful people, feared people, respected people, but this was the first time he truly admired someone. One rainy Thursday, he found her outside the clinic, staring up at the gray sky, eyes closed, letting the raindrops hit her skin like tiny blessings. He stepped beside her, umbrella in hand. You'll catch a cold. She smiled without opening her eyes. Rain doesn't scare me. I've walked through worse. Alexander looked at her, the ache in his chest sharper than before. Emma, I owe you more than just an apology. She finally turned to face him. No, you don't. You made a mistake. You owned it. Or here. That's enough. It's not for me, he said softly. Because since that night, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. Her breath caught. Alexander. He took a step closer, his voice trembling slightly for the first time in years. I know I'm the last person who deserves a second chance from you, but I want to earn one. Not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, just as a man who finally sees the kind of woman he wishes he could have met sooner. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Emma whispered, You want a second chance? He nodded. She looked him straight in the eyes and said, Start by walking me home in the rain. No umbrella. He blinked, then grinned. And together they walked down the soaked sidewalk, the city blurring around them. No suits, no titles. Just two hearts beginning again. Days turned into weeks, and what began as quiet companionship soon blossomed into something deeper. Alexander would wait outside the clinic at the end of Emma's shift, sometimes with 2 cups of coffee, sometimes with takeout, and sometimes with nothing but a warm smile. He didn't push. He didn't demand. He simply showed up. One night, after a particularly long clinic shift, Emma leaned against the park bench where he waited. You always wait for me, she said, her voice soft in the cool evening air. Alexander looked at her, eyes gentle. Because it's the best part of my day. She smiled, then hesitated. I'm still scared, you know. Of me. Of us. Of what this could be. And what it might break if it goes wrong. Alexander reached out, brushing a raindrop from her cheek. Then we'll take it slow. No pressure. No promises. Just truth. Emma looked into his eyes, seeing no trace of the ruthless CEO who once judged her without a word. Instead, she saw a man stripped of armor, willing to learn, willing to love. He took her hand. I want to know you. Every version of you. The med student. The tired volunteer. The girl who walked home in the rain. And what if I'm a mess? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled. Then I'll be the man who stays. Despite the warmth growing between them, reality didn't pause for love. Emma's scholarship interview was approaching, and with it came long nights, mounting pressure, and constant self-doubt. She was juggling classes, clinic work, and her aunt's recovery, all while navigating a bond with a man whose world still felt oceans away from hers. One evening, Alexander surprised her by waiting outside the university with a brown paper bag in hand. "What's this?" she asked. "Dinner. You skipped lunch again." She opened it and laughed. "You brought me dumplings. You said they were your comfort food. And I figured you could use a little comfort." Emma paused, heart swelling. No one had ever noticed the small things like that before. Not like he did. But just as she was about to thank him, her phone buzzed. A message from the hospital. Lily had collapsed. Without a word, Emma dropped her bag and ran. Alexander didn't hesitate. He was right behind her. At the hospital, Emma paced outside the emergency room, arms folded tight. They said it might be an infection. "She's been pushing herself too hard again," she said, voice trembling. Alexander rested a steady hand on her shoulder. "She'll be okay." Emma turned to him. "You don't know that." "No, but I do know she has you. And that makes all the difference." Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm so tired, Alex. Every time things start to feel better, life reminds me I don't belong in your world." He took both her hands, his voice calm but full of conviction. "Then maybe it's time I stepped into yours." Lily's condition stabilized by morning. The doctor explained that it was a mild infection from the old injury, nothing life-threatening, but a clear sign she needed rest. Emma sat at her bedside, gently brushing a strand of silver hair from her aunt's forehead. "I told you not to push yourself," she whispered. Lily stirred, eyes fluttering open. "And miss watching you fall in love with a billionaire?" "Not a chance." Emma flushed. "Aunt Lily." Alexander chuckled from the corner of the room. He had brought coffee and was now leaning casually against the wall, watching them with a soft smile. "She's got spirit," he said. "That's what gets her into trouble," Emma mumbled. Over the next few days, Alexander became a constant. He helped around the apartment, brought groceries, and even fixed the broken cabinet door that had been squeaking for months. But more than that, he simply listened to Emma's fears, her dreams, her stories about her childhood, her struggles, her triumphs. And one rainy afternoon, as they stood in the tiny kitchen, Emma washing dishes, Alexander drying, he said quietly, "I'm not going anywhere, you know." She looked at him, skeptical. "You say that now. But one day, your world will call you back." He stepped closer, his voice firm. "Then I'll bring you with me." Emma froze, hands in the soapy water. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I've built empires, Emma. Negotiated billion-dollar deals. But nothing's made me feel the way I feel when I'm with you. You make me want to build something real, for the first time in my life." She turned to him slowly, heart thudding. "But I'm not polished. I'm not perfect. I'm not the kind of woman who knows how to exist in your world. You're the kind of woman who made me want to be a better man," he whispered. And then he leaned in. Gentle. Intentional. Their first kiss wasn't fireworks or chaos. It was quiet, sincere, and absolutely life-changing. Weeks passed, and things between Emma and Alexander only deepened. They had their ups and downs like any couple, but the bond they shared felt unbreakable. Emma continued to work tirelessly for her scholarship, managing the weight of her responsibilities while still finding moments of peace with Alexander. It was a crisp autumn evening when Emma finally received the call. She had been accepted. Her dream, her future, was within her grasp. As she hung up the phone, the reality of it all began to sink in. She was leaving her old life behind. Leaving the small apartment, the endless shifts, the struggle to make ends meet. And though it was terrifying, it was also exhilarating. That evening, as they walked through the park near her aunt's apartment, Emma turned to Alexander. "I got the scholarship," she said, her voice a mixture of disbelief and joy. Alexander smiled, pride lighting up his face. "I knew you would." She paused, looking at him with a soft but serious expression. "But I don't want to leave." His eyebrows furrowed, unsure if he understood. "Leave? What do you mean?" "I don't want to leave you," she whispered. He stopped walking, his heart racing. Emma, I've spent my whole life thinking I wasn't worthy of someone like you. That I wasn't enough for your world. She shook her head. But you've shown me that I don't have to choose between my dreams and love. I don't want to leave, not without you. A breath caught in his chest, and before she could say another word, he pulled her into his arms. His lips brushed against her forehead. You don't have to. You never have to. He held her close, and for the first time, Emma realized that her dreams and her heart didn't have to be separate. She could have both. She could have love. She could have ambition. She could have him.